Hey listeners, we're so excited to chat with Siobhan today about her performance in the video game The Quarry. But we do talk about a few spoilery things, so if you haven't played yet and you don't want to know anything, check the show notes for the spoiler timestamps. Otherwise, enjoy the conversation. And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Siobhan Williams. She's an actress and singer who's been in shows like Deadly Class and Unreal. Her latest role is of Laura Kearney in the fantastic new horror video game, The Quarry, the latest game by Supermassive Games, the makers of Until Dawn. Hello.
Hey.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to chat with you about everything today. But before we do, can you take us back kind of to the beginning? When did you get introduced to horror?
So I think I was kind of unintentionally introduced to horror, like probably so many kids are. The movie that I brought today was probably my first introduction to being horrified at a movie. But that movie wasn't necessarily the genre of horror. So I'll say that my first actual horror movie that I ever saw as a kid was The Sixth Sense.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what my parents were thinking with that one.
Oh, so you watched it with the family. It wasn't like an accidental watch. It was like everyone sat down to watch it together.
I think it was one of those instances where I was in bed and I couldn't sleep. And this was like, you know, my parents' whole experience of parenting because I just had sleep issues my whole life. So as I normally did, you know, I went to bed, my parents were watching a movie and I got up and went to where my parents were watching TV and was like, can I hang out with you? And they were probably like, no, this isn't a children's movie. And I was like, but I'll be fine. I'm brave.
Famous last words.
Yeah. Literally not remembering all of like the family movies that I'd been traumatized by already. But I'm pretty sure they're like, okay, fine, you can sit and watch this movie. And then I remember within a couple of minutes, it was that scene where Haley Joel Osment goes into the kitchen and he thinks it's his mom. And she's turned away. And it's like, Mom. And then she eventually turns back. And I remember being like, oh my God, okay. What the fuck is happening? And I'm pretty sure I like then couldn't go to bed because I couldn't be alone.
Right.
So I probably just stayed and watched the rest of the movie because I was like, I need to figure out why this is okay and see the happy ending.
Do you remember how old you might have been when that happened?
I think I was 7 or 8.
Oh gosh, that movie is terrifying. It really actually is.
It is. And like, I know maybe it's more of a thriller than a horror, but it's still horrifying.
Oh, there's absolute moments of abject horror in that movie for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
100%.
I want to rewatch it actually because I remember bits and pieces from it still from all the way back then. And I do remember thinking, oh, wow, what a twist.
Yeah.
Worth staying up for.
It's a great twist.
Yeah.
And it holds up. We watched it recently. So I think it still holds up. So
Totally. Yeah, I know. I can't believe that was like 23 years ago now.
Girl, I know. What is time? What is time anymore?
Anyway, but so Siobhan, are you a horror person? Are you not really a horror fan? Do you still watch like films in the genre at all?
I do occasionally, but I have to say they have to be like specifically not slasher. They can't really be gory, and they can't have anything that will graphically stay in my mind forever because I can't unsee things once I see them. And then they just get like brain stained in my memory. So I have to like be a little bit delicate with myself, but I love like a good thriller or a horror that's not, you know, super graphic.
So like more of the psychological type?
Yeah, I love that.
What are some that you really like? That do you know any off the top of your head?
Yeah. I really liked Shutter Island when it came out. I remember seeing that in theaters, and that was like a little while back. And I know that there's a lot of people who didn't like that movie, but I thought it was really great. And Secret Window was cool too.
Oh, Secret Window is good. Good Stephen King
Yeah.
short story adaptation, honestly.
I forgot about that movie until like a month ago. Like I
Right?
forgot that movie happened and I was like, wait, that wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
It's just like one of those thrillers from that era that I'm like, oh wait, that was actually not a bad time. And it's creepy.
For sure. Big time. It was cool to see Johnny Depp in a role like that. And I really actually liked Bird Box a lot. Like I do kind of like that subgenre of horror that I like to call stress porn.
Yes.
Fucking stressed out the whole time, which is literally what Bird Box was, right? So I do like those kinds of movies too, which I mean,
Okay.
a lot of horror films fall into that category.
Yeah. So do you like because I mean, you just talked about Bird Box and being stressed out. Do you like the feeling of being scared?
I do when I'm in the mood for it, for
Okay.
sure. Like there's definitely nights where I'm like, okay, I want to watch a good horror movie tonight. Like I feel strong. I feel ready to like mess with my system a little bit. But I will say that I'm someone who has a hard time sleeping as is. So I think that's where a lot of my like abstaining from horror as much as like some other genres has come from. Like I remember even as a kid, like watching like Hocus Pocus and being terrified. And was it Little Monsters? That was what it was called, right?
Yeah. Yes. Is that the one with what's his name? Gosh, white.
Yeah, it's where the monster. There's like a whole
Fred
monster
Savage
under his bed, right? Yeah.
Yep, Fred Savage. That movie from like the late '80s. And is it
Yes.
Howie Mandel? Is the
Howie Mandel is in fact Maury.
he is
Oh my God.
the monster under the bed? Yeah, I remember seeing that one as a kid.
Yeah. It was really scary. I remember thinking I couldn't touch the carpet under my bed ever after that. And then I think those feelings are stuck with me. I was just like, I'm one of those people that can just be ruined by a movie. Gotta be careful, like what I allow myself to watch. So I think that's why the psychological stuff I could deal with more, because it just didn't feel like such a visual that would stick with me or like a theme. Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of what's shaped my experience of horror a little bit.
That makes sense. So also, because we're going to talk about this video game, are you a gamer at all?
Mm-hmm. I love games. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not great at them.
Oh, me neither. But they're fun.
It's fun to not be great at games, you know?
Who cares? That's why I like games where it's just you, because I don't like playing online with people, because then it's like very obvious how bad I am. And then I'm like, no, I want to go at my own pace and figure things out on my own and just like do my own thing.
Totally.
I like games.
I know. I really like to take my time and really explore and see everything and not rush through it. I'm like, I'm only going to be in this world for so long. So I want to like see every detail that's there. And it's so funny. Me and my boyfriend always joke because we were playing Super Mario for a long time. And I was just like, will you just wait for me? He's like, I'm supposed to go. I was like, no, you have to wait. Like it's not fun for me if I'm just racing to keep up with you. It's not my fault. You're better than me.
I'm trying my best.
I know. And it's literally Mario. But I do love games.
Do you like horror games? Like, have you played Until Dawn and games like that before?
Yes, I actually love horror games. For some reason, I seem to be able to handle them better than horror movies, which is kind of weird.
That is weird because
Really?
like I hear a lot of people that are big horror fans have a hard time playing video games because they're like right in the thick of things and controlling it. And so it gets rid of that like layer of what am I thinking? Detachment from what's happening. Yes. So it's interesting that's the opposite for you.
It is weird. Maybe it's like this false sense of control that if I play good enough, I'll be able to fix whatever terrible enemy is going to befall me, which is obviously not correct. But no, I loved like Resident Evil and Until Dawn. Yeah, it was huge for me. There's a couple that I still have to play. Like I have to play Dead by Daylight, and there's lots out there that I have yet to touch on. But no, I really love horror games.
That's so cool. Because we're talking about horror, I want to hear about, can you tell us a little bit about The Quarry and what it's about?
Yeah. So The Quarry takes place on the last day of camp after all of the kids who are attending summer camp go home, and the camp counselors accidentally get stranded at the site for an additional night, which nobody anticipated. And for whatever reason, the guy who runs the camp is freaking out and is like, okay, well, everybody just make sure you stay inside. I can't be here. I have to leave, but just stay inside all night. Don't do anything and don't do anything stupid. And I'll be back first thing in the morning to get you. And they're all like, well, we're a bunch of like 22-year-olds. There's no adults and no kids around. That's obviously not what we're going to do. So they, you know, start to party a little bit and whatnot. And then shit just really hits the fan. And my role is that of one of the counselors who's on her way to camp, actually before the video game even starts in the prologue. Her and her boyfriend are heading to camp to start as counselors at the beginning of the summer. And they kind of run into some crazy stuff and get accosted by this weird cop that they can't tell if he's crooked or not. And end up basically at the end of the prologue, you don't even know if they're going to make it or not. And so then the game continues on, and eventually my character shows up, and she's been through a lot.
She's been through the fucking ringer.
Yeah. So she comes in and tries to help all the counselors with their little predicament that they're in. And there's some supernatural stuff and lots of action and some pretty brain-stainingly graphic deaths.
There really are. Have you have you played the game yourself?
I have. I've played it 3 times now.
Have you managed to save all of the counselors and everything?
No.
Me neither.
No, you haven't?
No. Okay. I love this game so much, but I have to say that the arbitrary decision of leaving, spoiler alert, everyone, I'm going to spoil a moment in here, but it bothered me. The fact that like Max can just die by leaving the island at like towards the end. I was like, yeah, are you kidding me?
I know. When I played it with my partner, he chose that. And as he was doing it, I was like, oh no. He's gonna be so mad. And sure enough, he's just like, what?
I was like, are you kidding me? There was like 3 characters. I ended up losing 3 of the counselors the first time I played it, and he unfortunately was one of them, and I was so upset. I was like, no. Yeah,
that's not too bad. 3 is pretty good.
I killed all the family, the werewolf, or spoilers again, the werewolf family, they all died. But
yeah, they deserve to die.
They did. I agree.
Yeah. Everyone who's like, oh, well, I kept Constance and Jed alive. I'm like, why?
Why
would you do that? Yeah, my first playthrough, I think I killed everybody except Abby and Jacob. I killed Laura.
Abby is the first person I accidentally killed because I didn't shoot when I should have.
Right. It's an easy one to do for sure. It can be confusing sometimes too, because well, you just have no idea what's going to happen.
You don't. And that's what I love about these games. And I mean, because I loved Until Dawn, I thought was just such a great story. But what I love about the Quarry so much is that I felt like there was more permutations that could happen and more choice built into it that really made my playthrough feel like unique in a way.
I love that. I love that you say that. It's cool too, because I really didn't like Abby very much my first 2 playthroughs. She's probably one of my least favorite characters. And then my 3rd playthrough, when I was watching my partner play it, because of his choices, he got so many different scenes with Abby and Nick and so much different conversation. And I was just like, oh, she's super cute and lovely. So it's so funny. Yeah, it's neat that it's a game that you buy once, but so many people play so many times because you get a different game each time, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So from what I understand, did you do motion capture for it too?
Yeah, we did motion capture, which is all the body movement, and then performance capture, which is all the facial recording as well. We did it all at Digital Domain in LA, and we did it. They're the ones who are behind like Thanos and so much of the Avengers stuff, and they were actually behind the Tupac hologram as well.
Oh, really?
Back in the day, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they have some really cool stuff, and like the Time magazine reconstruction of who was it? I can't remember who it was. Damn. But they had a really sweet their software is amazing. Like these guys are geniuses. So it was really cool to be there. And yeah, we shot it over about 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah. But it was funny because we'd go in and we'd do, a week or two at a time, and then they'd go back and they'd render everything and build it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then we'd come back again 6 months later and do it again with new pieces. And of course, COVID affected things a little bit.
I'm always curious about motion capture because we talked with Maggie Robertson, who played Lady Dimitrescu in the latest Resident Evil game. And it's always, I love hearing the stories about what it was like for filming that, particularly as an actress, that's worked in more, filmic means. Was it hard adjusting to motion capture?
It's really cool. I'd say it's one of those things that's really hard to adjust to for the first, hour or day. There's some weird technical things that you have to do that you never have to think about in film, like, before you do any scene and at the end of every scene, you have to do a T-pose, which basically just calibrates all of your sensors on your body to the cameras.
Okay.
Because if you're standing a certain way, like your arm might be blocking a sensor and then that information isn't going to the camera. So it's just to kind of sort all your positioning out before and after a scene. And it's so funny how long it takes people to get that, in their head. And then it's weird because like after I was doing this, then I'd go to a film set and they'd say rolling and I'd be like, okay, T-pose. People would be like, what are you doing? So there's little technical things like that. And then of course, like you don't have a costume and there's no set, and there's just so much more imagination that's used when you're doing it. So I think just relying on the other people that you're working with, other actors in the scene, is so helpful, because if you're just really connected, then, none of the rest of that matters. And you're not trying to focus on what space you're in and what the circumstances are. You can just kind of exist in it without being too conscious of it. But it's really cool too, because they had so many environments that they could show us on the day. And they had like, we could look at ourselves in that environment and be like, oh, if I turn this way, I'm looking at a desk with a bunch of papers on it, or like, here's a weird poster on the wall. So that was really neat.
Wow.
I love the challenge. It's definitely a challenge, but I really like it once you're kind of settled into it. It's a fun exercise.
That's so cool.
Just think about motion capture. Just think about motion capture. Like, it blows my mind that you can just do that.
Me too. It's so beyond me how that technology, like I have a very, very limited understanding of how, it uses triangulation and there's cameras every 2 meters in the space, like in 3 dimensions and whatnot. But beyond that, I'm just like,
it's like magic.
It is. It's like witchcraft or magic.
I like witchcraft.
Yeah, it works for sure. It's really cool. And it's so neat seeing them, because there's always a bank of, computers next to the volume, and everyone's doing their respective job, whether it's like the face or the skeleton of the body or the sound. And there's just so much crazy 2100, like year 2100, it feels like stuff happening. You're just like, oh my God.
Wow.
It's just worlds colliding, it's like arts and technology, and it's really cool.
That's so cool.
That's really cool. Okay, so Siobhan, we talked to you about your horror history and your work with the Quarry, but what movie are we talking about today?
So I am bringing with me the legendary film Matilda.
Matilda! Okay.
Yes, by Roald Dahl.
Yeah.
For those of you unfamiliar, Matilda, a girl named Matilda, is gifted with a keen intellect and psychic powers, uses both to deal with her crude family and free her teacher from their sadistic headmistress. So, okay, Siobhan, tell us why this is your Scarred for Life story. Tell us everything. How old were you when you saw it? What scared you the most? Paint us your horror picture.
Okay, so at the time, this movie came out in 96, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came out, I was living in Newfoundland on the East Coast with my family. And I was just about to start not preschool, but kindergarten, actually, because I started it a year early because I'm a January birthday.
Me too.
Oh, nice. So you know how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was about to start school the coming fall, and I don't know, my parents thought it would be sweet to take me to see a movie inspired by Roald Dahl. I don't know if either of them had actually read the book yet. And I did grow to love Roald Dahl books. Like I read all of them for sure when I was a few years older. But it was actually the first movie that I ever saw in theaters.
Oh, wow.
So that was an experience in and of itself because it's, very stimulating for a 4-year-old. So we went in and it was like, oh, it's all about a girl with superpowers. And how exciting is that for any 4-year-old, right?
Uh-huh.
Like we're so limited in our power when we're young. And like, it's so vindicating for kids to be able to feel like they can have that unlimited freedom to do what they want or be their own person and make their own decisions. So yeah, I went in and I just remember thinking the movie was all great, thinking that her parents were horrible people, but then we got to the school stuff and I just remember them showing the chokey and I was like, this is what's fucking happening in September.
Oh no, that's right.
My life is about to change so much. Everything has been so good up until now. Like what? And the Trunchbull, I was just, I think like, I don't know if my parents, I don't know if I was crying or what, but I just remember being horrified. Like, I mean, just imagine like that's your only experience of what school is going to be like,
your only point of reference. And you're just like, I'm dead. Like it's over. Yeah. I'm going to have this. It's going to be terrible. I'm going to throw by my pigtails over a fucking fence.
I was just going to say, I probably literally had 2 braids in my hair because my mom loved to do that to me. And I was probably like looking at them like, these are going to be handles for the evil principal that tossed me with. So yeah, after the film, my parents had to sit me down and have a very serious conversation with me. And I probably didn't believe them. That wasn't what school was going to be like.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot.
So I have to ask, when you finally did go to school, were you like trepidatious?
I definitely was. Yes. And luckily, I think it became evident pretty quickly that wasn't going to happen.
Okay, good. I'm glad you had a good first day of experience of class and not like have a teacher from hell or something.
For sure. No, I was very wary. But luckily, I was never had to be put through any of that kind of stuff.
No chokies in your future.
No, but I remember literally crying for weeks to my parents being like, they're going to put me into what's, are you sure they don't have a chokey in this school? And yeah, I probably didn't believe it until I'd been there for like a month. And they were like, look, there's a chokey.
Okay, but I also thought that like the chokey was a thing because I was just like terrified. I was like internally terrified of it. Yeah. I was like, I have to be really good because I'm going to go to the principal's office. And if they don't have a chokey, they're going to have something similar. And I don't want to find out. And just like my little kid brain thinking about having to stand in the chokey for so long just brought panic into my little baby heart. Because just terrible. And also, so this is one of my favorite movies, like growing up. This was the movie I wanted to watch all the time. I wanted to be Matilda. I loved to read. Like she was just like my idol as a kid. Like it was my favorite thing. I so badly wanted to have like a Miss Honey situation, like so much. Now that I'm older and gay, I realize I also had a crush on Miss Honey. So that's fun to realize as you age.
Of course. Who wouldn't?
Exactly. But it's just like this movie was like so formative for me. And I always was just like, the biggest scary thing was assemblies and the chocolate cake. Like for that was the scene that really, really fucked me up because there's so many like amazing scenes we can talk about at the beginning. But there's a scene where when Matilda goes to school, what is his name? The boy's name.
It's like Augustus. No, that's Gus. It's Willy Wonka. It's like something glue.
Bruce Bogtrotter.
That's right. God, Roald Dahl's
great last name.
Are so good. Like the names, Bruce Bogtrotter. Having to eat that whole fucking chocolate cake was just like, for some reason, the thought of being forced to eat in front of an assembly of people is like my worst nightmare because of this movie. And so whenever we had an assembly at school, I was always like vaguely paranoid that they were going to roll out a cake. Like it never happened, obviously. But like that fear was always in the back of my fucking head that something crazy was going to happen like that, like in elementary school. Yeah. So
I bet.
This movie, I just love this movie so much.
Me too.
And I'm so glad you wanted to talk about it because this movie, like, I was never scared of it though, but I understand
No?
why. The Choky scared me, but I think I so badly loved Matilda and like who she was as a person. And I was like, if Matilda can do the Choky, I can do anything.
Yeah, for sure. I remember, it's funny because I have a sister who's 10 years younger than me, and she was so obsessed with Matilda too. So it's funny that you say that because it was a movie she always wanted to watch. Like I think we watched it at least once a week for years. And I didn't really think about it because I was pretty young at the time. I was probably like 13 or 14. So I wasn't thinking about, oh, what is it about this movie that she loves? I was just like, oh, she's a kid and likes what she likes. But I do remember as well, after seeing the film, trying so many times to move things with my eyes. Like I still do it sometimes.
Yeah, no, me too. This movie made me convinced that I could be psychic. Like between this and Harry Potter, I was fucked because all I wanted to do was be a magical person. Like
I know.
And like my family, like dressed me like this is very, it's kind of like I don't want to think too deeply into it. My family like always called me Matilda, and I was like, the implications of that are kind of fucked up if you think about like the family dynamics going on there. But like I loved to read, and like I would go to the library and come back with a lot of books, and I loved wearing those cute little like flower dresses and shit, and like would just sit in my room reading instead of like going outside. And so like I was the little Matilda, and I was like, well, if I'm like Matilda, then I can move things with my brain. And so like there's a scene at the beginning of Matilda where she makes all the things dance with her. And it's that like iconic scene with the Cheerios. The number of times I tried to make my cereal pour into the bowl, I still do it. But like just formative memories.
And it's still disappointing when it doesn't work.
For me, that would have been like the Force in Star Wars when I was a little kid. And I remember trying to like force push things and make things move. So I can relate to that aspect of it because, who doesn't want to be able to control things with their mind, right? Like,
for sure.
That's a fun childhood thing.
Totally. I mean, I remember when the Harry Potter movies came out, I would dream that I got to go to Hogwarts all the time. Like I had so many dreams that that's where I went to school, or I got the letter and I was going to go to school, or I was friends with all of those kids. Like it's so funny what a common desire it is for kids to wish that they had some sort of magical power. And I guess when you're at that age, you still believe that it's possible, which is kind of a sad thing that we lose that eventually. It's almost like, when you come of age and you kind of lose that spark in your eyes, it's almost like the realization that none of that stuff is real. Yeah. But you never really want to lose hope a little bit, even in your adult brain, that maybe.
I mean, like, I don't have kids, so I projected onto my cats. Like my cat turned 11 and I was like, oh my God, you're going to get your letter to Hogwarts. Like it's so silly. But it's like, I understand now why my parents loved being like Santa and like why my stepdad loved Harry Potter with us and stuff. Like it makes a lot of sense now, like older. So then I'm like, oh, that is actually really cute. And so I do it to my cats because I don't want kids, but it's like that way to keep that little magical spark alive in your head.
I love it. It's so true. And especially Matilda's a pretty extreme example of a kid who's born into a family that she's completely alienated from. Like, how is she even related to these people at all? But for kids who are born into something that's even a milder version of that, it must have felt so nice to see that represented, because I feel like it's not very often.
It's true, because like I was a kid like that, and my parents were divorced, so with my dad's side of the family I was very much like that. Like I was the little nerd who would like read, and they loved to drink beer and watch football, and I was very much like I liked to do theater and do art. I wasn't good at sports, so I was very much them. And I think I loved this movie so much because I felt like if I could be her and confident in myself, then like it would make things easier. And it really was like this, she was like the little voice in my head of like, because she's so confident, like despite the fact that her parents are absolute monsters, she's such a confident girl, which is both sad because, in these abuse situations, you're forced to grow up way faster than you should have to. But it just like that, I saw so much of myself in her, which is depressing. And I'm sorry, I'm getting very sad right now about this movie, but like, that's why I love it so much.
For sure. I mean, that's a huge part of, I don't know if either of you read much of Roald Dahl's work when you were younger?
I've read some of his stuff. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank as to what I would have read.
There's so many.
BFG?
The BFG, the Witches.
The Witches. I read The Witches.
Yeah.
Yeah, James and the Giant Peach. And it's funny because the adults in his novels were almost always
awful,
terrible people, right? And I know that he had a really hard life. Like, I know that his dad and his sister died within weeks of each other when he was like really young. And then his mom, I guess they were Norwegian, but they lived in Wales because they wanted them to have a nice British education and, you know, speak English and I guess have more opportunities or whatnot. But then after his dad and sister died, his mom didn't want to return to Norway with him because she wanted to still give him those opportunities and whatnot. So they put him through, you know, public schools, which were supposed to be more, you know, refined and whatnot. But he was like beaten horrendously by teachers and then by students because of the weird like prefect hierarchy at so many of those schools. And it just sounds like he had a hell of a time. And so I'm sure Mary Beth, like that, I mean, that like his books are depressing. They're really depressing.
Yeah.
They're really sad and messed up. Like they might, you know, we might have been able to turn it into like kind of a jest, making light of the situation with comedy or like extreme caricatures of people, but it is very dark. Like,
yeah, it's incredibly dark. And so this was my very first time watching this movie. Matilda would have come out in 96. So I would have been 15 when it came out, and so I was a little too old for it, for being a teen boy at that time. I remember seeing the commercials for it, but I'll be perfectly honest, and this is a moment that I've told Mary Beth, and she's already gearing up for it. I get this movie, and I don't know why, but I get this movie confused with Stuart Little.
That's funny. It's probably like the same, probably within the same couple of years.
Stuart Little came out, I think, later 90s, maybe 98, 99, I think.
It was 99.
But I get this one and Mouse Hunt and Matilda all confused as like one movie. And I mean, honestly,
and Stuart Little makes sense. They're both about money.
It does, yes, but not Matilda. And I agree. Like listeners, Mary Beth is just like holding her face. I don't know why. I kind of thought maybe that, like, as I was looking at the poster for Matilda, I was thinking, oh, I think that Mara Wilson, I thought she was in Stuart Little for some reason. I don't know.
Did you think she was the fucking mouse? That was what you fucking told me. Are you serious? Someone was a mouse that wasn't a mouse.
I just thought that they were all in like one combined movie or something. I don't know what was going on with my brain.
Oh,
it's just
God.
you see things.
Me who like grew up watching it was just like, how fucking dare you disgrace Matilda's name like this?
Yeah, she dragged me on Twitter when I mentioned this to her.
I did, in fact, drag him on Twitter. It was very funny.
But so watching this last night for the podcast, this was the very first time I had sat down to see not Stuart Little, but actually Matilda, and I was. Well, at the beginning, I was like, I'm curious when this is going to take a turn, because the opening scene, yeah, the parents are absolutely horrible. And it is, you know, it's a lot of abuse going on. The opening scene of her being a little baby, and they're just sort of dragging her out of there and saying, what are they going to do? Repossess her? And then ignoring her as she's like, you know, making her own breakfast and taking care of herself. I was like, okay, this is kind of horrifying, but I was like, where is this going to take a turn? And then we get to the school with Trunchbull and the Chokey, which, listeners, we've talked about the Chokey, but I just want to say it is described as a tall, narrow hole in a wall behind a door where you have to stand in a drippy pipe with jagged edges, and the walls have broken glass and nails sticking out. What a horrific image that kind of conjures for anyone. Even as an adult, I was like, Jesus, that's fucked up.
It's a saw trap for children.
It is.
It's a fucking saw. It's not even for children. It's a saw trap in general.
For anyone. For
any adult, like, stand in here for, is it like hours? Like the kids have to get put in the Chokey for hours. Like, no adult would pass that. They would be impaled immediately.
And there's like a foot of space between the ends of each nail and the starts of the ends of the other nails. So like if you move at all, you're just going to get impaled. Like it's really messed up.
Like an Iron Maiden, but like on crack. Like it's when Trunchbull like pushes Matilda in there and closes the door, and there's a camera angle of like the nails on the door coming into the camera. I was like, oh, how is this legal?
That's literally what I remember when I remember that first viewing of that movie is that exact shot. Totally. And there's like the smoke and from yeah.
It's horrifying.
It is.
But what kind of pulled me into the story was as a queer person, I was like, ooh, this is actually a lot of like dealing with stuff that a lot of queer kids had to deal with. Like it feels like an LGBTQ story in a way, because they have like a daughter, the parents are very nuclear family and heteronormative, like with their roles. The father, it's almost like a 50s kind of movie where the father goes out and work, the mom stays home, the brother is, you know, just sort of like a belching bully who like throws carrots at his sister. Like these are all like stereotypical roles. And then you have Matilda, who's like doesn't have anything to fit in with her family. And I thought back to me being a kid, and Mary Beth, you mentioned that you were interested in theater and stuff and artsy stuff, and that's me too. I didn't fit into any of these molds that my parents wanted me to fit into. You know, it wasn't like sit there and watch television, but I remember my dad trying to get me to play football, and I'm like, I have no interest in this. Like there's all this kind of stuff where they're trying to like force this sort of heteronormative family unit together, and me like being, I don't want any of this, and not feeling like I had anything in common with a lot of people. And so watching it even as an adult, I was like, ooh, this probably would have been my favorite movie as a kid if I saw it at that same ripe age.
Oh no, it was just, you were just a few years too it was late. Yeah, luckily Mary Beth, I guess, had it at that critical time. But yeah, I can imagine for sure they were just trying to imbue all their completely wrong beliefs for what they were on to her. And that's
I loved Rhea Pearlman as Mrs. Wormwood, the mother, because like first of all, she her accent is channeling the Plant horror movie. Why can't I just Little Shop of Horrors?
Oh, Little Shop of Horrors.
That kind of like Jersey accent, like just sort of like high pitched, like she is channeling that character. Yeah. And I loved her character so much, even though she was horrible. But there's that moment when Miss Honey comes to the family, and the mom is like saying, a girl does not get anywhere by looking intelligent. And then she's kind of insulting her for slaving away teaching kids their ABCs. And Miss Honey's response of like, don't sneer at educated people. And I was just like, this is such an interesting dynamic between like, you know, Matilda needs to be a girl in their eyes and needs to not worry about getting an education. Her dad wants her to stay home and sign for packages while everyone else is either at school or at work. And I'm just thinking, where are we? What kind of world are we in where the girl's not going to school, but the boy is? But I love that interchange there, because I think it kind of strikes to the heart of what this movie is getting at.
Totally. I love that. I think I also just got my Halloween costume. I think I want to be Mrs. Wormwood.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I know they're so extreme, and there's so many different levels of that exists in the world in parenting. And like, I know I've seen it firsthand with like families that are really promoting like toxic masculinity, and there's no room to be like scared or have feelings or be vulnerable in any way. And I just like, it breaks my heart every time I see that kind of stuff, because you're just gonna mess your kid up so much.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like, Matilda, you know, it doesn't have to be as obvious as it was in that film. Like it can be so damaging. And it is so damaging. And it's crazy that she goes from this abusive household to like somehow an even more extreme level of abusive adult. Like
seriously, Trunchbull is quite the villainess. I was impressed at how evil she is, I guess, for this kid. I mean, because we've covered a couple Roald Dahl shows on movies on this podcast. We talked about James and the Giant Peach. We've talked about witches. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was one too, right? Wasn't that written by him? Or am I mistaken? Yeah, so we've covered. But like her as a villain, I think trumps all the other villains that I've seen of his work. She's nasty.
Yeah. She's horrible. And the most messed up part is like she's meant to work with children, you know, and be a headmistress. She's put herself in that situation. It's like well, this is dark, but it's like pedophiles who like put themselves in positions where they're working with kids. You know, she like gets off on hurting kids.
Well, and so there was a moment in here, speaking of which, that like made me kind of sit back, and it's so we get the story of Miss Honey, right, where she's telling the story to Matilda about this girl that she knows. And first of all, I love the story because, you know, she goes, and I actually wrote this line down. She says, "You were born into a family that doesn't always appreciate you, but one day things are going to be very different." And that is the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is talking to all the queer kids out there that are, you know, don't fit in with their family. And we get like flashbacks to Trunchbull kind of putting her hand on the young kid's shoulder, and it gave me such a stranger danger vibe, and I was like, what is going on in this moment? But I don't know if that was like me reading too much into it, but she does it a couple times in those flashbacks, and it's creepy.
Yeah, it is really creepy. I remember the exact moment you're talking about. Yeah.
And I didn't really think about it until I was older either.
Yeah.
You know, I thought she was just like an asshole. I like hadn't thought about like her being predatory. And I think it's such an interesting look at the contrast in different kinds of abuse too, because it's like, you know, you have Matilda's parents who are incredibly abusive and neglectful, but then you have, and then you have on the other hand, Miss Trunchbull, who looks like she was physically harming a child. And you're seeing this like abuses in so many different forms, and not one is not like prioritized over the other, but it's showing how like these effects, what the effects look like no matter what. And I think Miss Honey also gave me a lot of hope when I was younger. Like, you know, I had like weird parent stuff. And so like I could grow up to be Miss Honey, and I loved her. And so, you know, this is like really personal. I'm so sorry, guys. I did not mean to get like so dark with talking about Matilda, but like,
don't be.
It's just such an important movie to me about breaking cycles of trauma in a time where that wasn't usually like discussed. And also like, because again, like Miss Honey and Matilda are parallel. So Miss Honey, we haven't really explained who Miss Honey is, have we? Miss Honey is Matilda's teacher, and she is like the most beautiful woman. And yes, I do have a crush on her, but she like looks like your most beautiful 90s like art teacher. And she's so kind and has like cute glasses and wears a nice denim, like the cute denim dresses and floral dresses. And it's just like very sweet and kind. And she's played by Beth Davids, who was also in 13 Ghosts, which is absolutely hysterical to me.
An Army of Darkness.
An Army of Darkness. I know. It's incredible. But Beth Davids is incredible as Miss Honey, who is like the most beautiful, empathetic person. It's like the first empathetic person Matilda has ever met in her life. Her classroom is like the most, that's what I wanted all of my classrooms to look like when I was going into school, like covered in like beautiful artwork and these beautiful wooden desks that you could put things in. And flowers, and it's just beautiful. But then when Trunchbull comes, everything has to go back. And it's
I love that moment.
Yes, all the kids knew exactly what to do. But just seeing this adult almost on a childlike level, because she is more aligned with the kids than the adults in this movie, I think. And it's really interesting to see an adult in that position in a movie like this. I feel like it's usually kids against adults. And Matilda having this ally in Miss Honey was something I don't think we see a lot of, or had seen a lot of at that point either. Like, it's not just adults are all terrible or like represent one thing. Like, they can also be incredibly supportive resources.
And it also showed, I think, for a kids movie, it showed an adult being scared of another adult.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know that adults can be victims of abuse too, because Ms. Honey is still paralyzed from the abuse that she suffered from, because Trunchbull was her aunt. So Miss Honey's parents both died. So she lived with Trunchbull from a young age. She's just been traumatized her whole life and still is, and has never been able to get past this. And so that's how her and Matilda are able to help each other. It's like you said, break those cycles of trauma. But I remember being really affected by seeing the fear in Miss Honey every time Trunchbull was around. I was like, oh, wow, I thought all adults weren't scared of anything.
Yeah. Speaking of Miss Honey, so I mean, Mary Beth, you kind of said it. She's kind of a lesbian icon or a queer icon in a way. And I remember seeing this tweet by Mara Wilson, who played Matilda. Quote, "It was one of the few children's films to show a strong, resilient female character overcome adversity and a family that did not understand her to create her own family and her own happiness through hard work and friendship. also they all have crushes on Miss Honey, which she was talking about like the queer aspect of this movie. And I was thinking back to like there's like a thing called a cottagecore aesthetic, which is like idealizations of countryside living, gardening, retro dresses, wild nature, and it's incredibly popular among the LGBTQ community, particularly queer women. And there's like some kind of sapphic allure of Miss Honey, where this comedy writer said
the sapphic allure of Miss Honey.
That sounds like a new book.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna write this book now. The
Yes,
sapphic
you are.
allure
Please
of
do.
Miss Honey. Okay.
But comedy writer Beck Shaw has quoted talking about this movie. She said that she's also basically an early prototype of the cottagecore lesbian. And most importantly, she's unmarried. She's staunchly a miss. She lives by herself. She doesn't express a desire to be married. And she says, when you're desperately trying to find queerness and queer representation, you often are relying on the absence of heterosexuality rather than explicit presence of queerness in literature. And so I think that's why a lot of queer people probably relate to this movie in so many different ways. And I find that so cool.
When she fucking puts the glasses down on her nose and up.
Okay, GIF. I didn't know that GIF was from this movie. I have used that GIF. It kind of like made me. Yes, I've used that GIF, not because like she kind of turns her glasses down. I've used it as like a oh hello, like, you know, but now watching this movie and going, oh, that's actually kind of inappropriate for what she's actually doing. But like,
now do you know how broken she is?
Yeah,
sexualize her.
I had no idea. That was from this movie until that moment. Is like, oh, it's the GIF. It's the GIF.
Totally. Yeah, there was something that was it was funny because she was so like, as we talked about, like she was so broken by the trauma of her childhood, but there was something that was so strong and steadfast about her too. And she just like existed outside the realm of definition, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I think everyone picked up on that. No, it's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
She's like just a shining example that no matter what, like even if you are still struggling with trauma, you can still break out of it and be a good person and have a good heart and be loving and full of love, which Matilda had never really had. And so it's like she is this beacon, even again for queer people, like you will have a really hard time, but you will be a good person. You will still find love. Like she really is such a queer icon. What the fuck? It's Honey.
Yeah, I love that. I've literally never thought about that. Probably because I haven't watched the movie since I was so young and I was so in the dark at the time. But that's amazing. It's so accurate.
Now, the other thing that I realized watching this again for the first time was that there's a lot of horror movie emphasis in this movie. First of all, it's basically a Carrie for kids. Like it has a happier ending than Carrie, but it's basically like you have a little girl who has an oppressive family unit. You know, she's having a rough time at school. In fact, Mitch Trunchbull even says that, you know, I am God in this school. Like there's that kind of religious aspect of it that she sees herself as playing with you know, the kids as like her almost like playthings in her creations. And then you have her like finding out her powers, and it's tied to like her, at least initially tied to her anger and her, you know, raw emotions, just like it was with Carrie. I'm like, this is Carrie for kids, and I'm loving it.
Nice.
A little less blood.
Yeah.
A little less blood.
And rated PG, basically. It's a PG Carrie.
And a happy ending, which thank goodness. I would not be able to handle this movie if this movie ended the way Carrie did.
No, then it would be like just such a tragedy. I know. I remember being so happy when Miss Honey goes to adopt her, and the parents are just because they just don't care. Just like,
we're going to Guam. Yeah,
that fucked me up so badly. The idea that the parents be like, oh yeah, cool, you can just have her. I was like, what? Like
you can do that?
You can do that? But then there's like that weird moment with the mom where she like tried. Like, I forgot the line when she like says something like "I tried" or something, like something weird, like trying to like make up for it. I feel like, right? Am I misremembering?
Yeah,
you're right, because she fights for a second. Yeah,
she does, and then she's like, "Oh, well, you'll be happier." But Terry, you were talking about the horror aspects, and we need to talk about when they are creeping through Miss Trunchbull's house, because that is a fucking like home invasion, don't breathe, stressful scenario. And maybe this is why I love horror movies. Like Matilda really like is like stress porn. If you talk about stress porn, like that segment is stress porn.
Yes. Oh my God. And it's a long scene. I
It
mean, I don't
is.
remember.
So long.
I don't remember how many minutes it is, but oh my God, when she comes and the chocolate's been moved and the jar is askew and she just like smells it.
Oh,
You're like, oh no.
she's
Oh,
like an animal with the scent caught in her nose, and she just starts trudging through the house, like desperation to like find them. And I'm like, oh, this is horror. This is actually horror.
Well, and like the way they shoot her to look so much bigger, and like she's trudging, and like things are shaking when she vaults over,
jumps over
the railing,
banister.
jumps over the banister and lands, and the dust comes out of like that is such like ingrained into my brain of her vaulting over. Like she just feels so big. Like the scale of Miss Trunchbull feels inhuman is how I felt a lot as a kid, because the way she's obviously like a bigger woman, and which is interesting in and of itself, and how like she's portrayed as kind of like a very like masculine lesbian type character. Interesting, weird, like contrasting kinds of like queer femininity in this movie. But they have her as this like monstrously feminine character, which I know, Terry, you noted that Roald Dahl does quite a bit in his stuff, like with the witches.
Yeah.
James and the Giant Peach.
Yep.
Those were the two off the top of my head, and how they have these like big, scary women who are like caricatures of people. I mean, Trunchbull's a caricature of a person.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
She's how I know what shot put is in the Olympics, I will say.
Yes. And javelin.
And javelin.
Totally. Me too. I know. I just remember hating her. I just remember hating her face and like her big, huge, heavy boots that like sounded like they were made out of lead anytime she walked anywhere. And it's funny because I remember like, I don't really read the news because it's super depressing, but on Twitter, you know how stuff comes up in the side column. I just remember there was something about them making Matilda, which I will never watch. I'm sure they'll do a great job, but I will never watch it. And then I just remember people being really up in arms about Emma Thompson, like wearing a fat suit and whatnot. And I was like,
Wait, they're remaking Matilda?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
and Emma Thompson is playing Trunchbull.
What?
Yeah, so like my issue with it is not so much the fat suit, because Trunchbull was supposed to be like a super butch, athletic, like Olympic, you know, she's supposed to be an Olympic, wasn't she an Olympic competitor in like
like she's like kind of like she's not fat, she's just like thick.
She's just big.
She's just like a muscular woman.
She's a bull. Like she's a bull, and you know, she's just this, and that's what I love. I looked up the definition of trunch, which is a obsolete term, but it used to be used what we would call a steak, and so it's basically like a very like steak, and then a bull, like not like a eating steak, but like a, you know, vampire steak. And so the two words together just it summons such an image, and I it's a perfect name for how her presence is on screen.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's such a big part of her character. Like, you know, if she was a tiny little elderly lady, I doubt she would have had the same impact on the children.
Yeah,
probably. So it'd be interesting to see how. I have no idea what vein. Maybe they're going in a totally different vein with movie. I really have no idea, because I don't want to know, because those movies, you just like can't touch them. I just like can't watch any of these remakes. It makes me so mad.
Well, and the thing with Trunchbull and like Emma Thompson as Trunchbull is I worry it's going to like veer into caricature. And the thing with Trunchbull is like, while she is larger than life in more ways than one, like she isn't funny. And I worry that putting, you know how people are horribly use like fat suits as like comedy and like to play that stuff up. She's not a funny character. She's not supposed to be fun or funny. Like she's fucking scary.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just don't know if that's going, I also don't know if Emma Thompson's the right person for me, like who would be as seriously, like if again, it just feels like comedy and I don't feel like it can be funny.
And she's like so beautiful, and like she would, to me, she's like a Miss Honey type.
Yeah.
She's like a warm, maternal and kind of.
I was just listening to another podcast about this. They were talking about that, like not Miss Honey. They're talking about Trunchbull and Matilda, and they were all female comedians who were like, I'm not conventionally attractive. I would love to play Miss Trunchbull. Stop casting conventionally attractive people as these roles. Like, us people out here who are not hot exist and would like to play these parts. Like, let us play these parts. We look like that. Like, it's fine. We are okay with looking like that. So it's very interesting.
Totally, for sure.
People approach these ugly characters. And it's like, look, we made a pretty person ugly. And it's like, shut up.
Totally. I find it way more interesting too. Like, that's why I tend to love British television, because the people look like people.
That's my grandmother and I talk about this all the time because we love British television and British films. Like, she loves Matilda, and the woman who plays Trunchbull is in another show we like, Call the Midwife. Have you ever watched Call the Midwife? She's in Call the Midwife, which is like a show about midwives in 1940s Britain. And we talk about how people look like people. They don't look like celebrities. They look like human beings who have like imperfect teeth and like have skin that hasn't like gone through a bunch of treatments. Like, they have wrinkles and they look like human beings. And like, I have that conversation with her quite a bit. It's very interesting.
I think that it's just so much better in every way for everybody. And it just makes for better stories. And yeah, I hate this routine of just like casting models, but like they're not actors, but like people will watch it because they're hot. So like that's what will get us the sales that we need and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but that's not interesting at all. And you're also attracting the wrong people. Like, to me, anytime, and like, obviously I have my backup about it because there's so many jobs that I've lost to models and like, influencers and stuff, because that's just the day that we live in and what sells and stuff. But for me, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, if that's what your values are, then I guess we're not interested in this for the same reason. So
yeah,
they're just making whatever kind of movie they're making or whatever TV show they're making, and they're a dime a dozen. But the shows that are really interesting to me like have people that are like, they're just characters because they are, not because they're trying to be. Like Trunchbull.
Yeah.
Preternaturally scary and intimidating and like kind of gross. And I'm sure in real life she's like beautiful and like, radiant and like obviously in the show she's like acting like an animal half the time. She's like, terrifying.
Her insults are fantastic though. And that's one thing that like, okay, so when we watched The Witches, and we talked about that movie, which I did see as a kid and absolutely loved. I just love the kind of lines and the words that would come out of the evil character's mouth. And here we have such great lines. Festering ball of pus. She says that her father says she's a real wart, a carbuncle, which no one uses the word carbuncle. I love that. A carbuncle, a blister, a festering pustule of malignant ooze. Like, these are such like visual digs. And she even says pissworm at one point, and I was like, "This is a PG-13 movie, and we're saying, or PG movie, and we're saying pissworm." Demented, drooling, slime-breathed, little Lilliputian, villainous sack of goat slime. Like, these are just classic, iconic lines that I'd love to call someone. Like, we say too much like "fuck you" and use that when we should be like, "You villainous, sack of goat slime." Like, that hurts.
Totally. I can't even imagine. Pissworm. I can't imagine being her and acting that role and having to say those things with a serious face to like a small kid.
It's so wild.
She kills it. Pam Ferris, who plays Trunchbull, fucking kills it. Like, she is terrifying in this role, and like, she really just makes me scared of her. And when I've seen her in other things, I've been like, Miss Trunchbull,
don't trust her.
Don't trust her.
She's gonna put you in the chokey.
She's gonna put me in the fucking chokey.
What's her character like in Call the Midwife?
She's one of the older nuns in Call the Midwife. Yeah, so she's one of the nuns, and she's one of like, she of course is like a no nonsense nun, but has like a soft inside, like a soft interior. So she's one of those characters.
She's also in Harry Potter.
Yeah, she's Aunt March. She's
what?
She's in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Yeah, there's like an image on IMDb of her floating away.
Yeah, it's when when he blows her up, and yeah.
Wait, did I know that?
I didn't until just now.
I don't know if I knew that.
Have you seen all the Harry Potter movies, Terry?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She looks so different. She's like so transformed.
Mm-hmm.
I know. It's very interesting looking at pictures of her when like she's not in like her scary Trunchbull outfit.
Yeah, like she looks so normal.
Very regal in like her IMDb photo.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, now I have to go look at her IMDb photo. Yeah. Oh my gosh, like what? She looks like a lovely lady.
Yeah.
Jeez, I thought she was just evil Trunchbull.
One of the things that I loved about this movie, and as I was digging into more information about it, is this idea of standing up to bullies, because we kind of talked about it a bit with Miss Honey, where she goes to Matilda's family and she stands up to them for her, and it's all about her trying to eventually overcome the oppressiveness of Miss Trunchbull for both her and Matilda. And apparently, to celebrate the book's 30th anniversary, the Roald Dahl Museum in Buckinghamshire created a statue of Matilda standing up to Trump.
No way.
Yeah, there is a statue of a Matilda facing down Trump as kind of like a Trunchbull type figure. And I love that.
That is awesome. I had no idea.
And Susie Dent, who was I'm going to mispronounce this, a lexicographer. I don't know what that is, but she was involved in the project. And she talks about how female rage has always been quite a big taboo. But what Matilda shows is if you channel it effectively, it can be a hugely important agent of protest. And so that was why they put out a poll, I guess, and the majority of people voted for Trump to be the stand-in for the statue. And it's kind of a cool statue. There's pictures of it all over the internet, but yeah, it's wild that that she's become such an iconic figure for standing up to that kind of bullies. And I was thinking in particular as I was watching this with the thing that Harry says, where I'm smart, you're dumb, I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong. And that sounds almost like a snippet of stuff you would hear Trump saying. So it seems really kind of appropriate, honestly.
Totally. It's the most petty, childish argument that no one can ever win.
Yeah.
Because you can't fight with someone who's that ignorant.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, it's even, I always laugh at that line when Danny DeVito is saying it, because he's obviously a very short man. So just like here and him being on like the same eye level as her saying that just makes me giggle every time.
And he directed it, right?
Yeah, Danny DeVito directed Matilda, which I just discovered today for some fucking reason. Like, where have I been? But yeah, he directed Matilda. Good for him.
I know, right? Like, I was just going to say, when we were talking about who they cast as Miss Honey and who they cast as Trunchbull, and we were talking about like the different representations of like femininity and like lesbianism, and like I was like, I wonder who was casting these and like what their thought process was, and like, who had their hands in what. And then I just remembered it was Danny DeVito, and I was like, I wonder if that was all his, like, I don't know, I wonder what his plan was, or if that was the whole creative team that was kind of like going for the same thing.
He had like a wild directorial spate in like the late 80s, early 90s too, because he did Throw Mama from the Train. He directed War of the Roses. He directed Hoffa, Matilda, Death to Smoochie.
What?
He did that? He
directed Death to Smoochie.
What a guy.
Yeah, just what a range there.
Yeah, holy shit.
Good Lord.
And then nothing after that?
It looks like the last movie he directed, he's done a lot of shorts, but the last movie he directed was called Duplex from 2003.
Oh God, that movie is not good.
I never saw it.
It's like a Ben Stiller, Drew Barrymore like couple comedy.
Okay.
I also saw it a long time ago, but it's not great. It was not great from what I remember.
Huh.
Yeah, that was his last movie, but he did a lot of shorts and a TV movie after that. But yeah, what a range in that short time, in about like a decade.
I guess he wanted to try one of everything.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Jeez, what a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to wrap up and give this our rating out of 5?
Yes. Before we do, though, so Siobhan, is this movie still terrifying as an adult?
I think that it's substantially less terrifying in the sort of visceral, obvious ways that I was as a child. I no longer feel that my survival is threatened. So that's nice.
I can't imagine seeing this right before you're going to be going into school. Like,
yeah, I don't know what my parents were thinking. But what is equally scary about it is all the topics that we touched on, I think, that are maybe more subtle themes that a young child would feel while watching it, but maybe not be able to put into words, with regards to how negligent and awful her family is. And unfortunately, the reality of just being, as both of you were as well, so alienated from the people that are supposed to be like your fierce protectors and your biggest advocates and create that warm, nurturing environment for you to grow up and make mistakes in. And yeah, that's like really heartbreaking, and that'll make your life so much harder as you grow up.
Yeah.
So that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Terry, so how many Trunchbull's insults out of 5 do you give Matilda?
You know what? I was not sure what to expect going into this movie. I'll be perfectly honest, because again, in my mind, when Mary Beth said that you wanted to talk about this movie, I was like, what is? I honestly, I didn't even know what it was about, and I was reading the IMDb synopsis, and I was like, a psychic? She has psychic abilities? Like, I honestly thought that this was like, and this is probably why I thought it was like in that kind of Stuart Little thing of like just a woman dealing with shitty people is what I thought it was. And so I was so surprised how much I actually really enjoyed this movie, both from being like, there's a lot of horror homages to it in it, and there's a lot of aspects to it of stuff that like, I'm like, ooh, I like this. And there's so much surprising thematic depth in this film that, I'm going to give it 4 fantastic Trunchbull insults out of 5. What about you, Mary Beth?
I gotta give it 5 whole pissworms out of 5. Obviously, this is a hugely influential movie for my young heart, but then just realizing how queer you can read this movie makes it even more important to me, and seeing how important it was, like going back to it as an adult and realizing like how much it shaped me as a kid is like really important to me. So obviously I'm very biased, but I think this is like a perfect movie. And it is just so beautiful and sad and incredible. And it's 5. Siobhan, you have the final word. How many Trunchbull's insults out of 5 do you give Matilda?
I am also going to give it 5 festering balls of pus.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
I just think that it's so fantastic on all levels. You can dive as deep into it as you want. It's great for kids who aren't about to start school, but it's great for all other kids, great for adults. There's just something in there that everyone can learn from and relate to, and gives you a little bit of hope in a suffocatingly dark world sometimes.
Yeah, I love that.
Remember, magic can exist.
Magic can exist.
It can exist.
Yeah.
Time to go back to like pushing Cheerios with our mind.
Right?
I'm going to move my liquid death can with my mind right now.
Right? The thing that always messes me up, and I remember looking this up over the years as an adult too, like I do believe that ESP is real. I do think that there's people that can, like, and I'm a pretty sciencey person. Wow, it really sounds like it. But I do believe that, like, I don't know, there's got to be something that can make some people more in tune with others' thoughts and things like that. And I know that it is a kind of ESP, I think. I can't remember what it's called, but it is like a listed form of telepathy or whatever you call it. And so I'm like, well, if those exist, maybe this does. Just haven't done it yet.
Just got to keep practicing.
That's right. I'll try to do your Cheerios from all the way over here, Mary Beth.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Matilda and making me finally watch and realize that it is a different movie from Stuart Little. So I totally appreciate that. Where can our listeners find you? And do you have anything coming up you can share?
Yes, so they can find me primarily on Instagram at Siobhan. That's Siobhan. And I have another video game coming out in the fall called The Chant. It's also a horror game, but different kind. It's not so much a choose your own adventure, more of a linear strategy game.
Okay.
Oh, hell yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Pretty supernatural too, though, so that'll be cool. Lots of creepy, gross monsters like Trenchbull.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. So listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with Matilda? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm a Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.